Indiana may be known as the Crossroads of America, but beneath its small towns, quiet farmland, and factory cities, there are darker crossroads where lives intersected with violence and then vanished into silence. Welcome back to the Agatha May Detective Agency. I'm Agatha May, and this is 12 Unsolved, Indiana, Part 1. In this episode, we step into the shadows of Indiana's past and look at 6 cases that stretch from coal country to farm roads, from busy shopping centers to rural cemeteries. Each story leaves behind unanswered questions, fractured families, and mysteries that have haunted communities for decades. Our first story takes us all the way back to 1946. In 1946, 29-year-old Thelma Jean Cobb stepped onto a bus in southern Indiana headed back home after visiting her father and stepmother. But she never arrived, and from that day forward, she was never seen again. Thelma came from a large family. There were 9 siblings in all, and she made her living as a housekeeper for the Walters family at Edwardsport, a small Knox County town built in coal country. The man of the house, Romy Walters, was a widower and father of 4 who spent his life in the coal mines until black lung took him in 1945. Before his death, Romy made a curious change to his will. At first, his eldest son was to be the executor, but Romy reversed that decision, instead naming Thelma to oversee his estate and granting her a share of it. Even after Romy's passing, Thelma stayed on to care for the Walters home, but such an inheritance didn't go unnoticed. Did resentment take root inside that family, festering beneath the surface? When Thelma vanished, there was no scene of violence, no trail of belongings, just a woman who stepped onto a bus and was swallowed by the rural landscape. The flat Indiana farmland, the coal-stained towns, the long stretches of road between villages, all of it became her last known backdrop. 7 years later, one of the Walters sons had her declared legally dead. With that, the portion she had inherited reverted back to the family. So it's hard not to wonder, was her disappearance convenient for someone waiting in the shadows? Or did she meet a different kind of danger along those lonely back roads, a stranger with darker intentions? These and many more questions are still left unanswered almost 80 years later. If you have any information about the disappearance of Thelma, please contact the Knox County Sheriff's Office at 812-882-7660. In Portland, Indiana, 1950, the quiet routines of a small town were broken by a grisly discovery. On the morning of February 28th, 33-year-old Garnet Ginn, a well-liked home economics teacher at Portland High School, failed to show up for work. Concern grew quickly since punctuality and dependability were Garnet's hallmarks. She rented a garage just a few doors down from the police station, where she kept her 1949 Pontiac Firebird. That morning, the superintendent of schools and a concerned neighbor opened the garage doors to check on her. They found Garnet's lifeless body hanging from a sewing machine belt tied to the door handle of her car. Authorities wasted little time ruling her death a suicide. Her remains were sent to a funeral home before the coroner could conduct a thorough investigation. But the ruling of suicide didn't sit well with her family. So weeks later, they had her body exhumed, and an autopsy revealed what the first conclusion had overlooked, or maybe just ignored. Garnet hadn't taken her own life. She'd been struck in the head 7 times and then strangled by human hands. The night before her death, Garnet had attended a party at the Portland Country Club. She dropped off a friend afterward and then returned to her garage around 10 p.m., according to a neighbor who saw her car. Another neighbor reported hearing a sound around the same time, something that might have been a scream, but in the stillness of rural Indiana nights, strange noises aren't necessarily unusual. She assumed it was only a cat. Rumors began to swirl after Garnett's death. Whispers of an affair with a married optometrist in town spread quickly, with some suggesting that he, or perhaps his wife, had reason to silence her. But gossip and suspicion were all the town ever had. No arrest was ever made, no justice followed. And 75 years later, her case remains unsolved. If you have any information in Garnett's case, please contact the Portland Police Department at 260-726-7161. Our next case is a little different from the others, and that's because it's been solved. I didn't know it had been solved until I was trying to find a photo of the subject. I had already written his story, so I'm going to read it as originally written, and then I'll fill you in on what happened to him. On August 17, 1952, the Stutzman farm southeast of LaGrange, Indiana, bustled with the rhythm of another summer day. 46-year-old farmer Ralph Stutzman was tending his chores and his children were nearby helping. When the children had finished, they returned to the house, and Ralph told them that he'd join them in about 20 minutes once he finished moving the cows out of a field. But Ralph never went back home. At first, it seemed impossible. A man doesn't just vanish from his own farmland in broad daylight. He hadn't packed a bag, hadn't set his affairs in order, hadn't given the faintest sign of wanting to leave behind his wife, his 13 children, yes, 13, and the life he'd built. Yet from that day forward, there wasn't a single trace of him. The night before his disappearance, Ralph had been at the Post Time Club, a local hangout where men gathered for drinks, conversation, and poker. Some of the townfolk mused that maybe the stakes had gotten too high that night, and Ralph crossed someone who wanted payback. Others wondered if he had simply walked away from the weight of responsibility. After all, 13 children is more than enough to make some men dream of escape. But those who knew Ralph said no. He wasn't the kind of man to abandon his family. He never contacted them again and never appeared in another town. Was Ralph the victim of a poker game gone wrong? Did someone bury their anger and him in the Indiana soil? Or did he, against all odds, slip away from everything he knew? Now, we don't have to worry about calling law enforcement with any tips because in 2023, Ralph's case was solved by a genealogist. While researching, the genealogist discovered that Ralph didn't die at the hands of disgruntled gamblers. He really had just walked off his farm, moved to Florida, and changed his name to Delbert Schrock of all things, and then started a whole ass new family and had 6 more kids. For the love of Pete, Ralph, tuck that cucumber back in the salad. Fathering 19 children just seems to be a bit excessive. I guess he wanted to prove to everyone that he knew how to use his dingle-dangle. Ralph died in 1968 and probably has about 75 grandchildren between both family lines. On August 12, 1972, 25-year-old Vicki Lynn Harrell drove to her local Kmart in Bloomington, Indiana, to make a quick exchange. Shoppers later recalled seeing her leave the store and step into her dark blue 1965 Plymouth Valiant. But after that moment, Vicki vanished. By the next day, when she hadn't come home, her roommate reported her missing. 2 days later, on August 14th, which was Vicki's 26th birthday, her car was found abandoned in a parking lot near College Mall in Bloomington. That same day, Vicki's body was discovered in a water-filled ditch in neighboring Owen County, about 30 minutes from where her car had been left. Her clothing was gone. She had been strangled with a rope, and in an act that made her murder even more horrific, her killer carved the initials KN into her chest and abdomen. Vicki's personal belongings were never recovered. Her father told police that a week before her murder, one of the windows in her car had been broken, but investigators could never connect that incident to her death. Vicki left behind a young daughter, a child who grew up without a mother because of a crime as cruel as it was senseless. More than 50 years have passed since that summer day in Bloomington, but the questions remain. Who took Vicki from the safety of a shopping trip and turned it into her final moments? And what did the carved initials mean? Were they a signature, a warning, or a taunt from her killer? If you have any information about the murder of Vicki Harrell, please contact the Indiana State Police at 812-332-4411. On the morning of January 27, 1974, 11-year-old Joseph Spizak finished his paper route in Hammond, Indiana, came home, dropped his sled and newspaper bag on the porch, and left again around 9:30 to attend Sunday Mass, which was something he did every week. When he didn't return right away, his mother assumed he'd got caught up playing with friends. By noon, he was seen at the schoolyard with a group of neighborhood kids. But the hours slipped by and the afternoon turned to evening. Worry began to take hold. In Joseph's family, one rule was ironclad. Everyone gathered at the dinner table at 5 o'clock. When he failed to show up, his mother called police, but the officer told her she had to wait 24 hours before filing a missing persons report. By the time the report was finally taken, Joseph's trail had already begun to fade. Witnesses later recalled seeing him near the Catholic cemetery along Kennedy Avenue, close to the Norfolk and Western Railroad tracks. Others said they spotted him on the tracks themselves, walking southeast near Hessville Cemetery at 169th in Arizona. Joseph's disappearance came at the height of John Wayne Gacy's reign of terror, and Gacy lived only 30 minutes away, but no evidence ever surfaced linking Joseph to the serial killer. Instead, rumors began to swirl closer to home. Some whispered that Joseph's own family might have been involved, but when police investigated, they found no truth to the claims. Joseph's fate remains a mystery. Did he cross paths with a predator hiding in plain sight? Was he swallowed by the dangers that lurked along the railroads and industrial edges of Hammond? Or was his disappearance part of a larger horror unfolding just across the Illinois line? More than 50 years later, the unanswered questions still hang over Hammond. If you have any information on the disappearance of Joseph, please contact the Hammond Police Department at 219-853-6490. On the evening of August 24, 1975, 24-year-old Pamela Ann Smith stepped out of her farmhouse east of Green Forks, Indiana, for what was supposed to be a short walk. She told her husband of just 5 months, Gerald, that she wouldn't be gone long. But as the summer twilight stretched on, Pamela never came back. When she didn't return, Gerald searched the surrounding fields and road himself, and when he found no trace of her, he called police. Officers combed the area, but Pamela seemed to have vanished into the farmland. 7 months later, in March of 1976, a highway worker stumbled across her remains in a cornfield near the edge of a wooded area in Henry County, which was just 20 minutes from her home. There was an autopsy, but given the state of her body, a cause of death couldn't be determined. Even so, investigators ruled her death a homicide. Beyond that, little is known. What kind of investigation followed has been lost to time. Whether her husband was ever considered a suspect remains unclear. What is certain is that a young woman set out for a walk on a warm August evening and never came home. If you have any information about the murder of Pamela, please contact the Greens Fork City Police Department at 765-886-4282. Indiana's landscape has always been shaped by movement. Trains cutting across the flat plains, highways connecting rural towns to cities, people passing through the crossroads. But for the families of Thelma Jean Cobb, Garnet Ginn, Ralph Stutzman, Vicki Lynn Harrell, Joseph Spizak, and Pamela Ann Smith, movement stopped the day their loved one vanished or was murdered. These cases remain etched in Indiana's history, not as headlines or solved puzzles, but as lingering questions carried through the decades. And until answers are found, their stories remain part of the state's darker side, reminders that not every road leads home. Thank you so much for being here. Please like, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts on why you think so many cases seem to remain unsolved. I'll be back soon with part 2 of 12 Unsolved Indiana. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.